Steelers fans, let's settle in because there's been a lot of talk swirling around this team, and every week seems to bring another debate about whether this roster truly has what it takes to compete deep into the season. It feels like every time you turn on the radio or scroll through social media, someone is asking if Pittsburgh is strong enough at this position or that one. And honestly, it reached a point where it made sense to step back and really break down each part of the roster with some clarity. Not from a perspective of comparing everything to those dynastic teams of decades past, and not from a place of unrealistic expectations, but simply trying to answer the question, is this team built well enough to win right now if the coaching and execution rise to the moment? So let's start on the offensive side, because that is where most of the conversation always seems to land. The offensive line has been under a microscope for what feels like an eternity, but the truth is that this group has quietly shifted its identity. When you look at the combination of youth, physicality, and the fact that several of these linemen continue to improve week after week, it becomes incredibly hard not to feel encouraged. This is no longer a line that constantly needs to be protected or schemed around. It has reached a point where you can realistically win with it. And if the growth trend continues, it could evolve into one of the real pillars of the franchise. Not perfect, but absolutely capable of anchoring a competitive offense. Tight end is another area where the team stands on solid footing. It is one of those rare rooms where you do not need to squint or search for upside. You can simply look at the players on hand and see reliability, versatility, and playmaking. It is not the position I would call the strongest on the team, but it is comfortably above the league's middle ground. When you imagine starting from scratch and building a roster player by player, the tight end group is the kind of unit any general manager would gladly take as a foundation. Now, wide receiver is where the debate heats up, and honestly, it is the one spot on offense where the concerns feel too real to ignore. The separation just is not there often enough. The consistency is not there. And in a league where passing explosiveness often separates contenders from pretenders, it is clear that Pittsburgh needs more than what it currently has. There are players who can contribute, and occasionally someone will flash, but the room lacks that dependable 1-2 punch that modern offenses rely on. The opposing defenses know it, and the tape shows it every week. Running back sits in a different category. It is not an elite room, not one that's going to intimidate anyone on paper, but it is absolutely functional with a chance to be more than that. Jaylen Warren, in particular, runs with the kind of energy and toughness that elevates the entire offense. The depth is fine, the production is there, and while no one is breaking into rarefied territory or pushing towards superstar status, the team does not need that to compete. This unit can hold its own, and that is enough when the blocking is stable and the scheme is functioning properly. Quarterback, though, is the big one. It always is, and this season has been a roller coaster. There have been stretches where the starter looked sharp, confident, and fully capable of running a winning offense. There have been stretches where it felt like everything was slipping in the wrong direction. The backups are perfectly suited for their roles, but none of that answers the only question that actually matters. Is the current quarterback play good enough to win right now? And the honest answer is that it depends on the week. The ceiling is there. The flashes are real. But the inconsistency makes it one of the hardest positions to evaluate on this entire roster. Give this team a top-tier quarterback, and suddenly every other offensive group looks better, more dynamic, more threatening. Without that, everything becomes a week-to-week evaluation. Shifting to the defensive side, things begin to feel different. The defensive front is the heartbeat of this team, and there is no hesitation in saying that this unit is more than good enough. It is stacked with talent, experience, strength, and the kind of playmaking that can dictate the tone of a game. Even when the run defense has a rough outing or when the pass rush does not fully capitalize because of coverage breakdowns, the raw ability in this group is undeniable. When you picture what a championship-caliber front looks like in today's league, Pittsburgh is right there in the conversation. There are only a handful of franchises that can claim a unit operating at this level. Linebacker is in a healthier place than it has been in a while. Not dominant, but solid. The league as a whole is starving for reliable off-ball linebackers, and what Pittsburgh has right now fits the mold of a group that can hold up for an entire season. There is youth, there is physicality, and there is still untapped development waiting to emerge. Some players are flirting with the possibility of taking that next leap, and if even one of them hits their stride, this room suddenly becomes one of the sneaky strengths of the roster. Safety is a complicated one. The current pieces have talent, experience, and instincts. But there's also a lingering sense that the mix is a bit uneven, like the roles do not perfectly complement one another. Still, when you evaluate pure ability, it is enough to win with, especially if the rotation settles and one of the younger players establishes himself as a true every-down presence. There is potential for this group to look much stronger with the right combinations and a bit more alignment between the scheme and the player's strengths. Cornerback, though, lands closer to the wide receiver situation. There is a significant gap between the top talent and the rest of the room, and the drop-off shows up often. Some players are holding their own admirably, and others are fighting through inconsistencies. It is not disastrous, but it is also not the kind of unit that you walk into a postseason battle feeling fully comfortable about. As with wide receiver, it is a position that may require attention sooner rather than later. And that sets the stage for the full picture of this roster heading into the heart of the 2025 season. A team with clear strengths, clear weaknesses, and plenty of areas that land somewhere in between. When you step back and look at this entire roster with a level head, it becomes clear that so much of Pittsburgh's season hinges on how well the strongest groups can elevate the areas that are still developing. That is the reality for most teams in the league, but with the Steelers it feels especially evident. The defensive front sets a tone that most opponents struggle to match, and that alone keeps this team competitive in games where the offense is still trying to find its rhythm. It is the kind of unit you expect to deliver momentum-changing plays, whether it is a burst off the edge, a collapse in the middle of the line, or a perfectly timed pressure that forces a quarterback into a mistake. That presence allows the coaching staff to be more flexible with the rest of the defense, but it also highlights the importance of the players behind it holding up their end. Linebacker fits right in as a supporting force. There are moments where this group flashes the kind of sideline-to-sideline ability that makes you believe they are on the cusp of becoming a real strength. There are other moments where the youth shows, especially in high-speed situations where anticipation matters as much as physical talent. Still, there is something promising about watching them grow into their roles. They are not at the level of the dominant linebackers Pittsburgh had in the past, but the league has evolved, and the responsibilities of this position look much different than they did a decade ago. What matters most is that they are capable of doing their job in a system built around pressure and disruption from the front. The safety group sits in that odd space between stability and uncertainty. You can see the intelligence on the field, the awareness, the physicality, the competitiveness. But you also notice moments where the lack of a true, versatile centerpiece forces the rotation into awkward adjustments. A player like Ramsey could easily grow into that role if he continues to refine his instincts and gets more consistent opportunities. The question is how quickly that development can happen and whether the coaching staff finds the right balance in mixing strengths and minimizing mismatches. Even with those uncertainties, the position remains functional enough to keep the defense from cracking under pressure, especially when the front seven is doing its job. Cornerback continues to feel like the position that sparks the most debate among fans. The gap between the top corner and the rest of the group shows up anytime the team faces a polished passing attack. There are encouraging stories, like Pierre finding his rhythm or Eccles stepping in and looking reliable when called upon. But for every step forward, there seems to be another moment where the room's limitations are exposed. Slay is one of those players who has the experience and technique, but the consistency does not always match what the defense needs from a top contributor. Porter is clearly a starting-level defender, but expecting him to carry the entire group is asking too much. What makes the situation even more challenging is that the skill sets do not always blend in a clean way. Some corners thrive in man coverage, others in zone, and the constant need to mix styles depending on matchups can lead to communication breakdowns. It is not a hopeless group, but it is one that needs reinforcing if Pittsburgh wants to feel secure against the better passing offenses in the league. Turning back to the offensive side, It is impossible to ignore the ripple effects caused by the uncertainty at quarterback. When a starter is sharp and confident, the offense immediately looks different. The line looks stronger. The running backs suddenly find cleaner lanes. The tight ends become legitimate threats rather than safety valves. Even the receivers, despite their limitations, look more effective when the timing is crisp and the ball arrives exactly where it should. But when the quarterback hesitates, or when accuracy wavers, everything collapses into a narrow window where defenses can crowd the box and eliminate the middle of the field. That inconsistency impacts every evaluation of this roster because the offense rises and falls with the rhythm of that position. The wide receivers feel the impact of this more than anyone. They are a hard-working group, and some of them do an excellent job competing for contested catches, fighting through physical coverage, and trying to make something happen after the catch. But without a true number one target who can force defenses to adjust, the entire passing game becomes easier to defend. Young receivers would look completely different with a superstar quarterback throwing to them. But the reality is that the team needs more than flashes. It needs reliability, separation, and someone who can tilt the field. Until that happens, the passing attack will continue to feel like a puzzle that is one piece short. The offensive line, for its part, has grown into a unit that can be trusted more often than not, and that alone represents significant progress from previous seasons. They have shown they can anchor long drives, open holes in the run game, and give the quarterback time when the play design supports them. There's still room to grow, especially among the younger players, but the foundation is finally in a place where you can imagine them becoming one of the better lines in the league if everything clicks. It is the type of group that grows better as the season goes on, gaining chemistry and rhythm with every snap. Running back continues to be one of the steadier elements of the offense. There is something energizing about watching Warren run with that fearless style, bursting through contact, turning small openings into meaningful gains. And while the room might not have the kind of superstar who alters game plans on his own, it has enough versatility to attack defenses in different ways depending on the situation. Every team wishes it had a Derrick Henry or a Christian McCaffrey, but the Steelers do not need that to win. What they have is functional, dependable, and capable of controlling the pace of a game when the blocking aligns. Tight end remains one of the most reliable sources of production. Whether it is blocking, catching, or finding soft spots in coverage, this group rarely disappears from games, even when the offense struggles. They help stabilize the passing game, they help in the run game, and they help keep defenses honest. In a season filled with ups and downs, the tight end room has consistently delivered exactly what you want from that position. The specialists also deserve recognition, even if they do not fall into the main roster discussion very often. Despite the occasional off night, the group as a whole is far better than most teams have. Whether it is punting, kicking, or handling returns, these players routinely provide stable field position and minimize mistakes. It is not a glamorous job, but it matters, and it is absolutely an area where Pittsburgh can say it is set. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. The air around the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex is thick with speculation, a palpable tension hanging over the practice fields as the Pittsburgh Steelers enter a crucial phase of their season. It's the kind of chatter that starts as a low murmur in the executive suites and quickly escalates into a deafening roar across the league. The biggest bombshell of the season is currently just a rumor, but if the whispers are accurate, it could fundamentally reshape the landscape of the AFC North. A primary, cornerstone player for the black and gold is reportedly seeking an exit. Sources close to the organization, who requested anonymity due to the extreme sensitivity of the situation, suggest that the star athlete, a figure whose presence has been instrumental to the team's identity and success for years, is growing increasingly restless. The cause of the reported discontent is hazy, ranging from supposed issues with the offensive scheme and contract discussions to broader disagreements about the team's long-term competitive direction. He wants a fresh start, a change of scenery, One source simply put it, he feels his prime years might be better utilized elsewhere, chasing that ring. The impact of such a departure cannot be overstated. This isn't a rotation player or a free agent depth signing. This is an established leader, a game wrecker whose jersey sales rival the city's most enduring icons. Losing him would create a vacuum not just in the stat sheet, but in the very soul of the locker room. The team hierarchy, from Coach Tomlin to General Manager Khan, is reportedly working feverishly behind the scenes to mend any rifts and quash the rumors. But the silence emanating from the player's own camp is telling. His recent public statements have been conspicuously non-committal, a stark contrast to his usually fiery, team-first rhetoric. Rival GMs are undoubtedly circling, smelling blood in the water. Names of potential landing spots are already being bandied about in league circles. Teams with cap space and an immediate need for his specialized talent. A trade of this magnitude would require a monumental haul, likely involving multiple high-round draft picks and a promising young player. For the Steelers, who pride themselves on stability and drafting their own talent, trading away a franchise pillar would be an unprecedented step, signaling a potential shift toward a full-scale rebuild, or at the very least, a philosophical pivot in their approach to team building. For now, it remains a dangerous, fascinating piece of sideline gossip, but the collective holding of breath across the Steel City suggests this rumor has far too much smoke to be without fire. The next few days could be some of the most pivotal in recent Steelers history. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.